today's episode is all about Anthony Harris. The Vikings have, according to Courtney Cronin and other notable Vikings reporters, they have, well, I guess it's the other way around. Anthony Harris has signed his franchise tender of $11.4 million. Harris and the Vikings now have until July 15th to agree to a long-term contract extension. So a few questions off of this, starting with the fact that the Vikings now have, you could argue, the two best safeties in the NFL. Pro Football Focus last year had Anthony Harris number 3 and Harrison Smith number 2. And the only other player in front of them was Justin Simmons from Denver. And coincidentally, Justin Simmons and Kareem Jackson, the only other tandem of safeties that makes $20+ million combined, just like the Vikings are going to pay those two guys. So how do you feel about the Vikings having two highly paid but also very good safeties on their roster here, Judd Zulgad?
I feel like this was not their plan. I feel like that the plan was in February, going back to the league scouting combine, Phil Mackey, when Mike Zimmer came out and talked about the fact and basically gave a very upfront statements about the fact it's going to be tough to bring Harris back. And at that point in time, we all expected him to hit the open market. You know, Mike can bluff a little bit on injuries and things, but he's not a very good liar. And I felt like his comments at that time pretty much indicated an expectation on his part, and of course he's a very defensive-minded coach, that Anthony Harris was going to walk. And I also don't see the benefit in the bluff there. So if he wasn't telling the truth, what's the benefit there? And then we get to right before free agency opens in March, and they put the franchise tag on Anthony Harris, which I think was a move made to try and then trade him. And I'm guessing that their goal was a second or third round pick, and the hope was that they could take a guy who, as you just said, was considered one of the top safeties in the National Football League in 2019 and turn him into a high draft pick.
Mm-hmm.
The draft picks, of course, are valued greatly by teams. Harris would have to be signed to a new contract by his new team. And for all of those reasons, he did not get traded. And now he's here. And he's a really good player. And I don't think the Vikings are unhappy about this, but I don't think it was their intention. I think the intention was to get a higher draft pick and do something with that pick, possibly take a player, possibly trade that for more picks. And so I think it's really nice that they've got these two guys, these two safeties who are both very effective, very good players. But I don't know in the grand scheme of things if this works out in the way that they thought. And I will say this. People keep saying, well, if your cornerbacks are going to be so inexperienced, which the Vikings are, you've got to have two good safeties. And I say, okay, I've watched football for a long time, and so have you. And yes, it's nice to have Smith and Harris back there, but they don't play corner. They don't play those positions. So I would say that the Vikings' feeling about this, and mine is, yes, Anthony Harris is a very good player. Was this the grand plan on the day they slapped the franchise tag on him in March? I don't think so.
I agree. I don't think they went in plan A saying, all right, let's go in and have two highly paid safeties here. I think they were looking for an extension of time, and I think they were looking for some leverage. And I actually think there's truth to the OBJ rumors. Like some of the stuff that has come out, I don't think it's just made up that the Vikings were potentially in discussions to bring in a star wide receiver. Okay, well, what assets would you have to give up to make that happen? And like draft pick, Anthony Harris, I think there was a bunch. My guess is they went in and said, all right, we're going to retool this defense. There's like 5 different scenarios that could play out. 2 or 3 involve Anthony Harris. At the end of the day, if we're forced because of just lack of trade options, or if we don't spend the free agency money on things that we want along the offensive line or elsewhere, like if at the end of the day we just are stuck, quote unquote, with Anthony Harris, there are worse problems to have in the NFL, especially when you have young cornerbacks. And so where I'm kind of at with this is, ideally, from a roster construction and salary cap standpoint, you wouldn't pay two safeties $10 and $11 million, and you wouldn't pay a running back like the Vikings, it seems, are going to do with Dalvin Cook over $10, $12 million. I don't think those are the positions you want to be spending $30 to $40 million on and eating up a huge percentage of your $195, $200 million salary cap. But Anthony Harris is one of the best defensive players in the NFL. Dalvin Cook is one of the best offensive players in the NFL. And so, like, in a vacuum, I think it's great that those guys are both wearing purple in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
But zooming out to the macro, I don't love the strategy of paying so much money for those positions. So I'm sort of torn on the Anthony Harris thing in that, yeah, definitely, guy's an awesome football player.
Yes.
Guy helps you in 2020 in a lot of different ways.
Yes.
All right, well, how are you making up for it? Now, if Jeff Gladney becomes a stud starting cornerback and he's on a rookie deal, cool, you've made up for it. Because then you could say, well, if you flip-flopped it, you know, for a starting safety and a starting cornerback, combined they make about $14-15 million, and it doesn't really matter that one of them makes 11, one of them makes 3 or whatever Gladney is going to make. So looking at just the free agent side of this, not the 15 draft picks, the Vikings have brought in Tajay Sharp, who's going to compete for probably the number 3 wide receiver spot. I don't see him. I mean, I guess he could start the season as the number 2 wide receiver over Justin Jefferson, but he's basically competing for your number 3 wide receiver spot. Michael Pierce, defensive tackle, and then Anthony Zettel, just sort of a guy at pass rusher.
Mm-hmm.
Those are their 3 free agent signings, and then obviously franchise tagging Anthony Harris. What grade would you give them in their limited cap space? Like, it's not like they came in with $50 or $100 million to spend. How would you grade them on how they've used their limited amount of dollars on free agents?
So for this exercise and the purposes of it, I'm going to use what I consider to be previous bad acts against them, which are they put themselves in this predicament through obviously decisions that they made in recent off seasons as well, which also goes to the heart of the Anthony Barr contract, because Barr was out the door and begged to come back, and they brought him back on what is a pretty good contract for Anthony Barr. And I would give them a C-. It's not impressive. And look, the draft was good. I'm impressed, okay? I think the draft was good. We don't know for sure, but there were enough things done there and positions filled where it looks like guys fell to them. They got the guys that they wanted. That is excellent. Good for you. But free agency-wise, this is underwhelming, Phil. It just is. And when you have Rhodes get old and leave, and that's fine, and Trey Waynes, look, I think Trey Waynes was overpaid by the Bengals. I would not have brought him back, so I totally get that too. But to me, you've got to be in a situation to step up then and say, okay, we might not be able to get a Hall of Fame corner to replace these guys, but we can at least have the money and resources to go out and sign replacements. My problem with the free agency moves is, and Pierce is the only guy of the 3 that you went through to sign a multi-year contract. He signed 3 years, $27 million. Sharp got 1 year, $1 million, and then a defensive end, Anthony Zettel, who had 6.5 sacks a couple of years ago with the Lions in 2017, 1 year, $1 million as well. And I wouldn't be surprised if he's the type of guy who doesn't make it out of training camp. But the predicament that you put yourself in where you could only do those deals, to me, goes back to, okay, you're planning to pay Cook in the macro. Is that smart? You signed Cousins to free up more cap space, but you're paying him like a top 5 quarterback, basically, and he's not. That doesn't mean I don't like him. But my problem isn't the guys they didn't sign in free agency per se. It's the guys they have signed previously that tie up that cap space. And so I think what the Vikings were able to do with all the picks in the draft might be fruitful and might be good. But from just a pure free agency right now, and things could change. There's a lot of guys still out there who have not signed, in large part because of the pandemic and the inability to look at them and get them to your facilities and actually give them physicals. But right now, I'm going C-. I don't think it's impressive at all.
So I'm kind of with you. I'm going to go a C on this one. And again, like, I don't know what they could have done to earn an A with so little cap space to use. But just looking at Spotrac.com right now, just to get the current salary cap space, this is my theory, okay? So they have about $10 to $12 million in cap space right now, according to this. Right. I don't think that counts some of the draft picks. So let's call it like $7 million with draft picks, all right?
Yep.
So $7 million in current cap space, which, as we did on one of our episodes last week here on Purple Daily, you could sign Everson Griffin potentially with that money. There's a couple veteran cornerbacks. There's some options out there. But let's take that $7 million. Tajay Sharp's $1 million. Anthony Zettel's $1 million, and then Michael Pierce at $5 million. Michael Pierce, like, he's certainly not going to remind you of the Williams Wall or Linval Joseph, but like, he's a professional defensive tackle. Like, he'll slide in and he'll be fine.
Sure.
But all of that together is $14 million. If the Vikings knew they were going to make a huge push to draft 15 players all on rookie deals, and I get that you're not going to use all 15 players. Like some of those guys are going to get cut. A lot of those guys are 7th and 6th round picks. So I'm not saying you're going to have 15 rookies on your roster, but like you have more rookies and more potential out of those rookie contracts than almost any other team in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
Would it have been a better approach in free agency to aim for like one big splash signing with a pool of $14 million or 12 or $13 million of it, let's say, than to go a Michael Pierce over here and then like maybe a veteran cornerback over there and then like Tajay Sharp over here and like Anthony Zettel you're going to cut and eat like $600,000 in dead cap anyways. That's my only question. And I don't even I can't say definitively, well, you should have done this with that money because it's a two-way street in free agency. And I'm sure they made a play for certain players and certain players wanted to sign elsewhere. That's where I'm going with this. Like if you knew you were going to draft 15 players,
right?
Would you have done the dink and dunk approach in free agency, or would you have said, listen, let's pool our money together,
right?
Sign one player that we feel great about, and then let young players on rookie deals fill the rest of the void.
If you knew, so if Anthony Harris had left, the franchise tag, which is also the salary cap price for 2020, is $11.4 million for this year. If you had known, hey, he's going to leave, you'll get a compensatory pick next year. I'm guessing if he gets signed elsewhere, it would have been a 3rd round compensatory pick.
Mm-hmm.
But you're going to free up potentially $11.4 million and be able to be in the bidding, for instance, for a cornerback.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I'm not saying it's a Hall of Fame cornerback, but let's say it's a good cornerback. Just from a positional standpoint, so forget the names. Would you have preferred to put that amount of cash towards a cornerback as opposed to a second safety who's really damn good? But by the way, you've already got a very good safety.
So my answer on that, because I do know the cornerbacks that were available, and I just feel like for the price range you're talking about, you're not going to get a needle moving. Like you're going to get a league average, good, solid, starting caliber cornerback. Anthony Harris is much better than that at safety. And so like I'm not willing to just say goodbye to one of the best safeties in the NFL because like, I could get a much lesser guy at a position that I need more of. Let's start with the really good players and then figure out the rest. And so that is one thing that I do commend the Vikings having done here in this offseason is, all right, is it ideal that we're kind of going in with a blank canvas at cornerback and Mike Hughes, who is not reliable yet, really is our most reliable option at that position. I'd rather just be able to lay my head on the pillow at night and say, I have maybe the 2 best safeties in the entire NFL. If not, it's definitely 2 of the top 5 safeties. And so we can at least feel good about our shell here. We've got a couple safeties over the top, a Danielle Hunter over here who's Hall of Fame bound at some point. Eric Kendricks is one of the best linebackers in the NFL, and then sort of figure the rest out. I'd rather have the best safety than a league average cornerback, even though cornerback is a bigger position of need.
It's a lot invested in one position, and Smith is now going to be, I think at 11.4 mil for Harris, he's going to make substantially more in base salary than Smith is. It's just an interesting way to go about it, and my belief is that their thought, mistakenly probably, was that they could pry a 2nd round pick for him, and trade him
for this year.
Yes, because once you slap the franchise tag on him, even before he signs it, he becomes your property. He can't hit the market. And so I think their original goal that day was we'll trade him and get something more than what we would get for the compensatory pick. I don't think that their original intent, as good as Harris is, was to be sitting here today with him having signed the $11.4 million tender and to have these 2 safeties. It doesn't hurt them. It certainly doesn't kill them. It just seemed like the original goal was probably to flip him.
Do you feel better, though, that the Vikings have Smith and Harris in the backfield for 2020, or would you have rather seen them let Harris walk and try to get a bigger time cornerback?
To help you further down the road,
right?
That's the other hard part here is you don't really know what to make of the 2020 season. You just are they going to play 16 games? How does no fans impact the season? Yeah, I just like if you're telling me I could have had apples to apples,
Yeah.
I could have swapped out Anthony Harris for an equally great shutdown corner. I will take the equally great shutdown corner. If the trade-off was Anthony Harris and the money that he would have made for a far lesser cornerback relative to position and like a third round draft pick for this year, all right, that just feels like I'm filling a positional need and then taking a gamble on a third round pick. There's no guarantees I'm going to make up for one of the best secondary players in the NFL. So while I am a little skittish about where they're allocating their money, I'm not to the point where I'm just like, well, you can't have two safeties like that are that good and paid that much money. All right, what's the fair trade-off here? And I don't know, and I'm sure they explored that for 2 months. And
They're very much trying to do what's going to amount, and I don't know if it's possible, to a soft rebuild in certain areas.
Yeah.
And that's
fine.
I don't know in 2020 if that's going to work or not. Like they're trying to get away with, hey, can we put this guy in there, and we're not going to be as good here as we thought that we like to be, and we're going to try and develop these guys on the fly. This will be, I think you could say, beyond a shadow of a doubt, since the Vikings got successful with Zimmer here, this will be his toughest assignment defensive coaching wise.
Absolutely.
Since 2014, and he came in and took on a bad defense and certainly got some guys like Rhodes into being very good players. This is going to be his most significant challenge. And the expectation, though, they can't win 7 games and be like, that's okay. 2014, he got here and there was time. There's not that time now.
2014, though, was a much harder assignment because he was literally taking over one of the 2 or 3 worst defenses in the NFL with just a broken secondary. They didn't really. Everson Griffin was a pass rusher, but they didn't really have. Jared Allen had come to the end of his run.
But but at that time, he had a couple of years. Like if you were good, you're good. If you're not, that's fine too.
But I would say let's not make it. There are so many coaches in the NFL that would love the security blanket and the safety, no pun intended, of having maybe the 2 best safeties in the NFL, 2 of the top 5, one of the best linebackers, and one of the best pass rushers. If you could say, listen, I can't guarantee you anything else. We're going to give you kind of a mix of veterans and rookies at the other spots.
Mm-hmm.
But you will start with more than 1/3 of your defense is going to be some of the best players in the NFL at every level. I think you would say, all right, cool. Like Mike Zimmer should be able to make it work. Yeah. Not on the level of the best defense. I don't think he's going to coach up the best defense in the NFL this year, but like he should be able to take this framework and make it work and have this be a formidable defense. Or if not,
I was going to say, if not too,
well,
and this is where it's nice.
Eric Bieniemy will be a great head coach of the Vikings.
And this is where it's nice if you have a top 5 quarterback then, because if your defense is not as good as expected, guess what? Your quarterback is great. In this case, your quarterback is good, not great. Last question. So the Vikings, I believe the date is July 15th. They have until then to sign Harris to a multi-year extension, which would obviously allocate the resources on the salary cap completely differently. And if we get to July 16th, or I think it's 3 p.m. on July 15th, he then is locked into the 1-year, $11.4 million franchise tag.
Yes.
Assuming that you are also working very hard right now to sign Dalvin Cook to a rich extension, do you sign Harris to an extension, or do you say, you know what, we're good with you for 2020, and yeah, it's a big cap hit, but it's 1 year, and you're going to hit the market again potentially in 2021.
And a third element in this, actually, Harrison Smith, I believe, is up for a contract extension starting after the 2020 season. So because his guaranteed money, I believe, is gone after 2020, and so he's going to be at age 32 after this season, going to be looking for a contract extension. So that plays into this as well. I would go franchise tag 1 year. I would not sign Anthony Harris to an extension. I'd ride it out for 1 year. On top of the fact that you got to be careful about paying safeties too much money. I think it's fair to say, listen, dude, prove it. You had a great year last year. You haven't done it for 6 years in a row like Harrison Smith has. You prove it, and then we can talk. And worst case scenario, you franchise him again, right? Which you can do if you want to.
Yes.
So I don't think there's there's no harm, no foul. Not to mention another element to this is we don't know what the salary cap is going to be going into 2021. It's possible the league takes a huge bath financially. If not likely, the league takes a huge bath financially if they can't put fans in the stadiums. If the salary cap comes down for 2021, okay, even more of a reason to not lock into something long-term with both of your safeties. So I think you play it out, and then you can make a decision on one or both of those guys after the 2020 season.
The third thing is Harris, while he has only been starting for 2 years, I believe is going to turn 29 in the coming months.
Yeah, he's not a
So
kid.
he's not a young guy. And so do I want to sign him to a potential 3 to 5 year extension at that age? Probably not.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see what happens between now and July 15th. But either way, based on Anthony Harris's Facebook post, in which at the end of it, in gold highlighted, he said, "I am most excited for the opportunity to help bring a Super Bowl to Minnesota and the best fans in the country." It seems like it's not going to be an issue either way for him. He's going to get rich. He's going to get paid.
I think he's happy.
And then he's going
Wouldn't you
to
be happy if I
show up to camp on
walked
time.
up and
Here's
gave
$11
you
million.
$11.4 million?
It's not like quarterbacks getting all pissy about
Wouldn't you be
getting
pleased?
franchised. How can you franchise me? This is disrespectful. We're giving you $30 million. Shut up. Okay. That's Judd Zulgad. I'm Phil Mackey, Declan Goff, and this is Purple Daily. Thank you to everyone who has given us a 5-star rating or review on Apple or wherever you listen to podcasts. And thank you to everyone who has clicked the subscribe button on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/ScoreNorth.